So, let me welcome on the stage our esteemed guest, Zoltan Vardi, startup mentor founder, founder of the Launch Code. Zoltan has been with us for such a long time. A lot of additions, always with us. Zoltan, take the stage away.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, there you go. So after hearing a deep dive into deep tech and all of the products and technology and research that go into creating one foundation of, or one pillar of a positive business, I want to shift the conversation to the other side of the business, which is basically how do you generate the revenues from customers to pay for all this fantastic technology and research. Now, I'm a guy who has built my career on sales, and so a lot of people assume that I'm a born salesman, but nothing could be further from the truth. I know this because I was born into a family of academics, researchers. Both my parents were university professors, and they were, well, let's say they had a kind of an interesting relationship with selling and with commercial things in general. They were a bit kind of making fun of salespeople. I remember when I was a child and a salesperson would call my home, my mother would answer the phone, and she would pretend to be the maid and tell the person on the other line that the family had moved to Europe for several months and would not be coming back anytime soon. Clearly, the message was, do not call here ever again. Imagine their surprise when, after a brief stint as a journalist, I actually decided to shift to the business side of the media. And early on in this transition, I actually had the opportunity to work with a senior salesperson who really helped me shift my mindset about what selling was. And it was in embracing this mind shift and mindset that enabled me to take on increasingly more senior sales roles, ultimately becoming Senior Vice President of Global Ad Sales for NBC Universal International based in London, overseeing a $150 million business in 30 countries. So, I don't know what your starting point or your belief about sales is. It could be that sales is about trying to convince somebody to buy something they don't really need. Or maybe it's something you fear because you don't understand. It's like the voodoo of sales and marketing. Or maybe you just don't like the idea of being rejected. Right? You're a product person. You don't want to deal with selling. Whatever your belief is, there's one fundamental truth that you must understand about business. And that is that nothing happens until somebody sells something. Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, said this, and what he meant by this is that the transaction between a buyer and a seller is what drives business. You can have an incredible product. It can have all the bells and whistles. But if you can't pay people to pay for it, it's not a business, it's a hobby. So, knowing how to sell and market to customers is fundamental if you want to build a long-term sustainable business. The best way to achieve this is to adapt the same mindset that I adapted 27 years ago. You see, what this gentleman taught me is that selling is not about trying to convince people to buy something they don't need. What you're actually doing is helping somebody solve a problem. And let's be honest, who is it that doesn't want people to help them solve their problem? And so, understanding that you're providing a product or a service that helps improve somebody else's lives completely changes your approach. Now, many of you probably are selling to business customers. So in this case, you're helping them build additional revenues, save costs, improve efficiency, whatever it is that your product or service does. But what you're doing is you're helping them solve a problem. And it was this mind shift and mindset that I adopted that ultimately enabled me to close $2 billion worth of sales over the course of my 30-year career as a C-suite executive, as an entrepreneur, and as an investor. That's why I call it the $2 billion mindset. And so what I want to do today is to give you a deep dive into 3 elements of this mindset. The first is the problem-solution connection. I want to explain to you what that is and why that sits at the heart of successful selling. Then I want to talk to you about the importance of clear and simple communication. and explain the 3 things you have to have in place in order to be able to engage your potential customers to take action and say yes to whatever it is you're selling. And finally, I want to talk about the importance of having a structured process that is built on a clear, beneficial client acquisition channel and then a repeatable, standardized process. If you follow these principles, I believe you will not only begin to like sales, you will not only become more successful at sales, but you might actually grow to love sales, the same way that I grew to love sales so many years ago. And it might motivate you, just for these next 15 minutes, to not look at the LinkedIn post you're looking at right now and the Instagram post you're looking at right now, and to really take in some of the information I'm going to share with you today, because it's going to have a significant impact on your business. So a few months ago, I injured my knee running, a long trail run in the woods. And after about 3 days, my knee was still hurting. And so I decided I need to go to a doctor to get it checked out. And I could have gone to a general practitioner, but instead I chose an orthopedic doctor, somebody who specialized in knees. And I went to the doctor, he looked at my knee, immediately diagnosed the problem, gave me a cortisone shot. I paid him his fee, and I was a happy customer. I had a very specific problem, a knee injury. I found a very specific solution, a doctor who did nothing but operate on knees 24 hours a day. And we basically found a match. And I paid him his fee, and he provided a service to me. You know, we make these problem-solution connections every day in our lives. We do it when we choose where we're going to go to holiday. We do it when we decide where we're going to go to dinner. We do it when we decide how we're going to refurbish our home. This kind of connection between a specific problem and find a specific solution is fundamental to our lives. In order to adopt a $2 billion mindset, you simply have to adapt this thinking to your business. And you do that by determining what problem you solve, who you solve it for, and how you solve it differently than everybody else. One of the first things I learned when I started in sales is that you have to pick one problem to solve. Trying to solve multiple problems at the same time causes confusion and leads to a lack of focus. You know, today we think of Amazon.com as the world's biggest e-commerce site. But actually in 1995, when Jeff Bezos launched Amazon, he sold one product, books, to one audience, tech geeks, because those are the people that were using the internet in 1995, who basically wanted the convenience of buying books from home. And it was only after he established that product fit, that problem-solution connection, that he started adding additional products to his bounty, music, DVDs, and the like, ultimately to become the world's biggest, basically, shopping site. Your goal should be to become the perfect solution for one very specific problem, not to be one of many solutions to one of many problems. It's likely that the problem you solve is something that a lot of different types of customers have. Unfortunately, if you're trying to communicate to multiple different types of customers, you're not going to be able to stick out from the crowd. There's a great saying, the man who chases 2 rabbits at once catches neither. This is true in business as well. I help business-to-business tech founders struggling with sales to sell and market to enterprise customers. Selling and generating revenues is a fundamental problem in business. Governments have that problem. Corporations have that problem. Small businesses, charities even have that problem. Yet, every single one of those types of customers has a different set of resources, a different decision-making process, a different way and starting point for how sales impacts their business. So I chose to focus on you, startup founders. Why? Because I know that generating revenues is critical to your business. It's a lifeline. I understand that many of you are uncomfortable with sales because it's not something that you've done in the past. I understand how you think, how you act, how you make decisions. I know where to reach you. And so as a result, I have a very clear target of who I want to speak to. Business-to-business tech founders struggling with sales. You need to find the target audience that your solution speaks to, where you are the best possible solution for that particular type of customer. You also need to explain why your solution is unique or compelling. The fact is, you have competition. I know many startup founders believe they've invented sliced bread, and there's no other competition out there. Unfortunately, that's not true. Because even if you can't find a very specific comparison to what you're doing, same technology, same solution, there's still competition from laziness and complacency because customers don't want to make change. People used to do math problems on pen and paper before somebody invented Excel. Right? There are non-traditional, non-technical solutions to old problems that people still use. Your unique or compelling difference will either come from some special benefit, your accuracy, your speed, your convenience, or it will be coming from some special process or methodology or approach that you take that is different from everybody else's. Identify your competitive advantage, and it will make it clear why people should use you and not your competitors. When I first started out in sales, coming to conferences like this was always a bit of a frustration for me. Because I would meet people, I wouldn't know what to say, I wouldn't have a clear idea of what I would talk about in terms of the product I was selling. It was just very frustrating. It was a problem. And I often come across and experience this problem now with startup founders. Just the other day, I was in Slovenia speaking at another conference, and a young tech founder came to me, and I asked him the question I'm sure he's heard 50 times before, so what does your business do? He then proceeded to share a 5-minute monologue full of every single buzzword you can think of, from AI and distributed cloud and hyper-automation, ultimately leaving me completely speechless because I just didn't understand what his company did. I politely thanked him, and I moved on. And it occurred to me, how often do you communicate with your customers in the same way? You come up with word salad, and you expect your customers to eat it, to understand why they should buy what you're selling. The fact is, attention spans are very short, and they're getting shorter by the year. If you can't explain why your customers should engage with what you're offering in less than 10 seconds, they're gone. They've moved on. So in order for you to be able to get your customers to engage, you have to have a clear value proposition, a simple product offering. You have to be able to use what I call customer-first communication. A value proposition is a single sentence that explains what problem you solve, for who, and why you're better than the competition. Generally speaking, if you don't have a good value proposition, you're sort of like this boat without a steering wheel or rudder out in the open ocean. You're going to go wherever the waves take you. But if you have a clear value proposition, you grip the wheel and you determine the direction of your business. Now, the problem that most startup founders make is they speak in their value proposition like they're talking to computers and robots and not talking to human beings. So try this. Create a value proposition as if you were explaining it to an intelligent 12-year-old. That's the level of communication that you should have. So what does that look like in practice? Well, instead of integrating gamification, you're making it fun to participate. Instead of reducing churn, you're attracting loyal customers. Instead of being a data-driven AI platform, you're an automated data tool. And perhaps you're not helping decarbonize your customer's footprint, but you're saving the environment. Speak to people like they're human beings, and they'll react like human beings to you. One of the biggest misperceptions that founders have is that by tailoring their solution to meet the needs of a specific customer, they are somehow being a better service provider. Actually, the opposite is true. Because the more choice you give your customers, you're placing the burden of deciding what they need on them. The reality is most customers don't understand the solution they need. They just have a problem, they want to solve it. So the best thing you can do is to reduce the choice, ideally to 3 options: small, medium, large. Basic, advanced, premium. Chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. The simpler you make it for your customers to choose by distributing the features and the benefits across these 3 options, making the middle option the best balance of cost and value, the quicker your decision will be. This is the best way to speed up the sales process when you're talking to potential customers. Every single customer ultimately wants to know what problem you solve for them. They don't care who you are, they don't care where you're from, They don't care how fantastic you are, how many people you've done business with, until they understand the answer to the question, what problem are you solving for me? That's what I call customer-first communication. So you should start your messaging, your communication with customers with, this is the problem we solve, this is how we solve it, and this is what we'd like you to do. Problem, solution, call to action. Book a meeting, book a demo, download a piece of content. Create that structure and then build credibility through testimonials and logos and details about your business, but not before, because nobody cares who you are until they understand what problem you solve for them. One of the things I experienced when I went from one sales role to the next is I would spend the first few months understanding the product, understanding the sales process, understanding what levers you needed to pull in order to be able to close more deals. And it was a bit of a chaotic situation, right? Well, if you're building a startup, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. You're basically in controlled chaos when you're building a business. And nowhere is that more clear than in sales. Your goal should be to create first a clear understanding of the client acquisition methodology that generates the quickest inbound leads, and combined with a very clear structured process that you can implement on an ongoing, over and over basis. You do that by first starting with outbound sales, then accelerating your growth through partnerships and inbound marketing, and finally creating and scaling a process. Outbound sales is when you basically reach out to potential customers and understand their problems. You talk to them, you get a sense of what problem they have, you handle their objections, you use that feedback to inform your product, inform your messaging, inform your business. You know, a lot of business tech founders who are not comfortable with sales try to outsource this. They get somebody else to do it, or they even found early on outside agencies to do this, which I think is a horrible mistake. Do not spare yourself the pain of outbound sales, because you will benefit 10x from it if you go through the process yourself. Okay? Understand ultimately who your ideal customer is, understand how they behave, how they buy. Once you have that, that is worth gold. Because what it's going to enable you to do is to then accelerate into other areas of client acquisition. The first is partnerships. Partnerships is basically when you work with third parties to boost your credibility and your reach. Partners can be distributors who are basically selling something similar to you or some complementary services, and they're packaging it together. It can be what I call aggregators. These are trade organizations or agencies that collect a large number of customers under one roof that you can speak to directly. Or they can be agents who sell on your behalf in a specific market or a specific vertical. Whatever those partnerships are, if you find the right partners and manage them effectively, you'll be able to 10x your sales growth. You also can boost and accelerate your growth by using inbound marketing. Inbound marketing is when you use digital advertising, content, public relations, events like this to generate interest from your potential customers. And you lead them through that magical process of knowing you, liking you, and trusting you, ultimately to become your customer. All right? And there's a whole range of tools that you can use, and then you will go through that process of testing various options in order to provide the right result. Now, I would like you to think that it's easy. It isn't. It's very hard, actually. What this is a tremendous process of trial and error, of testing various things, of seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. Sometimes it can be very painful and frustrating. Just know that once you find that right mix of client acquisition channels, you're already a long way there. Because afterwards, what you need is to codify and structure and systemize that process so you can repeat it over and over and over again, and that is when you start really accelerating your sales growth. When you found that perfect formula and you can apply it on an ongoing basis, you will be able to scale your sales process and ultimately build a long-term sustainable business. So, many years ago when I started with selling, I had a very incorrect view of what sales is, right? In my environment, sales was something to be ashamed of, something where you try to trick people into buying something they don't need. Nothing could be further from the truth. The reality is, as a salesperson, as a founder who sells, what you're doing is you're helping people solve an important problem. And if you adopt that mindset, what you'll actually do is set yourself down the path towards growing your business. you will be able to create a strong problem-solution connection, identifying the single problem you solve, who you solve it for, and how you solve it differently than anybody else. You'll be able to use simple, clear communication to clearly make your customers engage in what you're offering them. Having a clear value proposition, making it easy for them to choose from a product offering, making them understand that you're solving a problem for them. And then finally, when you take all of these elements together, you'll be able to create and find the right client acquisition channel, and then be able to replicate that on an ongoing basis. And my belief is if you apply these principles, you will not only start liking sales, you will be successful at sales, and you will adopt the $2 billion mindset that will enable you to build the business you always dream about. If anybody's interested in my presentation, just send an email to zoltan.vardi@me.com, write 2 billion in the subject line, and I'll be happy to send you a link to a PDF version. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Zoltan. Thank you. I usually wonder to myself after your presentations, how come is it always that my attention span never ends and I can focus on what you're actually saying? Well, now I know you're treating me like a very clever 11-year-old, which is a compliment, to be honest, because I always thought of myself... 12, okay. That is still a compliment, because I always thought of myself as an, I don't know, like 8-year-old inside, so you know. Guys, we have a bit more of additional time. Maybe you have the questions for Zoltan. We can take some from the audience, if that's fine with you. Like we can distribute the mics if you want to. Okay.
Who here is comfortable with how they're...
Oh, I see a hand. I see a hand there.
Fantastic.
Sir, can I get some of the volunteers to bring the microphone to the sir on the left part? Take the mic first. All right, so the microphone there, and then we're gonna get the very brave person. All right.
Actually, while we're waiting for that, I'm just curious, if you could raise your hand if you're currently comfortable with the way your revenues are growing and how you're selling. Who wants to raise their hand? I see one, two. Okay, we have two people. Who's uncomfortable with the way the revenues or sales are going right now? Okay, about 10. Everybody else is right in the middle, I guess, yeah? Okay, yeah, what's the question?
It was a big pleasure to hear such a speech from such a big businessman like you, and it is so motivational, and I want to start a career as a young journalist. And I wanted to ask you, what could you advise yourself if you had a time machine as you were 18 years old?
Mm-hmm. Advise myself in what perspective, from a career perspective, or?
Like, you have only one moment and one advice you can give yourself when you are 18.
Well, I think the one thing I would have encouraged myself to do at age 18 is to spend my 20s experimenting more, and then spend my 30s focusing on one thing and doing it really, really, really well, because I think that's ultimately what is going to drive your progress, whether it's your career or your life. Giving yourself a chance to try a lot of different things, and then picking something that you put all of your resources and energy into doing, and that's what's going to really accelerate your personal and your professional growth. What did
you said, well, you started off as a like journalist.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what was this moment of like no return where you knew that, you know, I'm ready to give up it all and try something completely different?
Well, so I actually did it in 2 steps. I transitioned from being a journalist, where you hopefully learn to communicate clearly and convincingly, into marketing, where you basically, again, learned how to create messaging and content that gets people excited about whatever you're selling. And then it was from marketing that I transitioned to sales. So it was a couple of different steps. But I think for me, it was always an understanding that you know, as a journalist, you're conveying information, but you're not really engaging with your audience in a very meaningful way. I always thought that on the sales and marketing side, you're getting people to take action, which I think is really exciting and a great way to see the impact of your work.
Absolutely.
Plus, it pays a lot better, I can tell you that much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have the time for one more question, and I see 2 hands here. Perfect. Just wait for the mics. Okay. Okay. 3 more. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Zoltan, for this great presentation. So my question is the following. Well, if you are like early stage startup, but your solution is for the big guys, for the big players, and they're not really keen to pay for a no-name solution, right? Because they usually pay for the solution that are proven by the time. The question is how to sell to such a guys, what to do.
Yeah.
How do you think?
So that's a very typical situation, right? When you're an early stage company, you're trying to get into what I call enterprise customers, right? So the big corporations, you have to do a lot of heavy lifting to be considered a serious partner. Generally speaking, I do a whole presentation on this. You know, corporations are very risk averse. You know, they don't really try things that are not guaranteed, and startups by nature want to do things quickly, and the two mindsets clash. What I would recommend is, first of all, solve a problem that matters. What I mean by that is if you want to get in front of a big customer and a big company, you have to make sure that whatever you're offering them as a solution is something that is meaningful to their business, right? It's going to really improve their revenues or drop their costs in a meaningful way. If it's not big enough to matter, they're not going to put the energy into it. So it starts with the problem. The second is if you've done a good job of creating that problem-solution connection, there's no reason that they shouldn't pay for that solution. I think it's an easy out for them to say, well, we'll try it for free. My personal impression is, and this is borne out in experience, people don't value something they don't pay for. You know, it's just psychology. If you they've done studies, if you just have people pay $1 for something, already the perceived value is much higher. So rather than giving it for free, I would say, I'm prepared to do a short-term agreement, let's say a 1-year agreement, and I'll give you the first 3 months of that at a discount or for free. But you've already agreed to the full annual contract. Until you get that type of commitment, I wouldn't get into a deal, because once you do something for free, it's always very difficult to get people and customers to value it at its proper value.
I have a small feeling that it was kind of a teaser for your workshop, which is happening later in the day. So Zoltan is actually holding a workshop here. So in case if you are interested in a bit more in-depth talks and absolutely getting the perspective from him, I absolutely recommend you to check it out and make sure you book your spot, because, well, obviously there is a big demand for what you're trying to tell us. And as I remember, we had definitely had one more person with the question. Can I ask?
And I'm sorry, just to say, so it's at 1340 today. It's a workshop, and it's called
Fix your value
proposition or fail. So it's a 5-step process where I'll take you through the process to create a simple value proposition that's going to get people to engage. So if you're interested in that, please come by at 1340 today.
Yeah, and let's take that one last question from the lucky guy who got his last place in the queue. Perfect, great.
Thank you. Hello, Zoltan.
Hi.
Nice talk. My question is more about qualification process, where you naturally disqualify some amount of bad fits. How does it look like, and what is the difference between outbound prospecting and inbound lead generation in terms of how you disqualify your prospects? Thank you.
Right. So 2-part question. Part 1, how do you disqualify prospects? So it is a matter of trial and error, right? At the beginning, you probably have a pretty broad idea of who you're speaking to. And as you go through the process, you will start discovering that certain types of customers you thought were relevant are no longer relevant. And what I find is you move towards focus. So you start taking people out of that until you arrive ultimately at the ideal type of customer. I don't think there's a shortcut for that. I mean, you could get lucky and choose perfectly at the beginning. What you actually have to be comfortable with is saying no. And I know that's a very, very difficult thing to do when you're looking to get any revenues. But actually, the more you can discipline yourself to say no to the customers that are not a good fit, the more likely it is you're going to start focusing on the ones that matter and save valuable time and resources on customers that you would normally spend on customers who are not going to convert in the long term. So that's the first thing. Go towards focus. The second, outbound versus inbound, they work in parallel. I don't think it's one or the other. It's both. But I always believe that you have to start with outbound sales, because that's the process that's going to enable you to find that ideal customer profile. Once you have that, or you're getting towards that, you use that to inform the messaging and the approach that you use in inbound marketing to get people excited. At the end of the day, whether they come through outbound or inbound, the qualification process is the same. You have to make sure that they have the right problem, that they have the resources, the money to pay for the solution that you're offering, and that they're willing to take action very soon, because the last thing you want to do is to spend a lot of time with a customer who gives you a lot of maybes rather than a straight yes or a straight no, because it wastes your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.